On February 20th, 2026, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the president's sweeping tariff powers were unconstitutional. Within 24 hours, the White House responded by signing a new executive order imposing fresh tariffs through a different legal mechanism. For Canada, the damage is already done. Steel exports are down 25%. The auto sector is bleeding. The Bank of Canada is now forecasting GDP growth of just 1.25% over the next 2 years. Thousands of manufacturing jobs have already been cut. And here is what nobody in this conversation is saying out loud. While Canada is watching its economy restructure in real time, Australia just overhauled its entire immigration system, is actively recruiting skilled workers in 36% of all its job categories, and is offering faster permanent residency pathways than it has in over a decade. So the question this video is going to answer is simple. If you are a skilled worker, a professional, or someone who had a Canadian plan that is now looking shaky, is Australia the smarter move in 2026? We are going to compare both countries across 6 categories using real data from this month. And by the end of this video, you will have a clear, honest answer. Let's get into it. Before we compare, let me be clear about what this video is and what it is not. This is not an anti-Canada video. Canada remains one of the most livable countries on Earth, and for many people, it is still the right choice. But when a country's economy is being actively reshaped by a trade war it did not start, and when a competing destination is simultaneously opening its doors wider to skilled workers, that is a comparison that deserves an honest, data-driven look. We are going to compare Toronto, Ontario as our Canadian reference city, and Sydney, New South Wales as our Australian reference. Both are the economic capitals of their countries. Both are where the majority of skilled immigrants end up, and both are where the job markets, salaries, and cost of living are most relevant to the people watching this video. 6 categories, real 2026 numbers. Let's go. We have to start with the tariff situation because this is the reason you're watching this video. The United States has imposed what economists are calling a fragmented tariff structure on Canada. Most exports covered under the Canada-US-Mexico agreement enter the US duty-free, but key industries do not. Steel faces tariffs as high as 35 to 50%. Aluminum is at 25%. The auto sector, which is one of Canada's largest employers, faces ongoing tariffs on parts and vehicles that are not CUSMA compliant. The real-world impact of this is not theoretical. Canadian steel exports have already fallen 25%. The automotive sector is down 5%, aluminum down 6%. And according to RBC Economics, the tariff pressure that businesses have absorbed so far is about to show up much more significantly in 2026 in hiring freezes, wage stagnation, and in some cases, outright job cuts. The Bank of Canada, in a statement published just this month, said Canada is no longer experiencing just a cyclical downturn. It is undergoing a structural transition. Those 2 words matter. Cyclical downturns recover. Structural transitions mean entire sectors permanently change shape. The industries hit hardest, auto, steel, aluminum, lumber, and manufacturing, employ hundreds of thousands of Canadians and tens of thousands of skilled immigrants who moved to Canada specifically for those roles. Now let's look at Australia. Australia's economy is not immune to global uncertainty, but it is insulated from the US tariff war in a way Canada is not. Australia's exports to the United States are not the foundation of its economy. Mining, services, and domestic consumption are. The Reserve Bank of Australia has not issued any structural transition warnings. Australia's GDP is growing at a rate that outpaces Canada's forecast for the next 2 years. For a skilled worker evaluating where to build their next decade, this macro difference matters enormously. Canada's near-term economic story is about managing damage. Australia's is about managing growth. Let's talk about what actually lands in your bank account. The average gross salary in Canada in 2026 sits at approximately 65,000 to 68,000 Canadian dollars per year. After federal and provincial income tax in Ontario, a worker on that median salary takes home roughly 48,000 to 50,000 Canadian dollars annually, about $4,100 per month. In Australia, the average gross salary is approximately 102,000 Australian dollars per year. After federal income tax and the 2% Medicare levy, the same median worker takes home around 76,000 to 78,000 Australian dollars annually, about $6,400 per month. Now, before you call that comparison unfair, those are the actual median figures from each country's official data. Australian salaries are genuinely higher across most professional categories. A registered nurse earns 87,750 AUD on average in Australia. The same role in Canada earns between 57,000 and 75,000 Canadian dollars. A software engineer in Australia earns 110,000 to 130,000 Australian dollars. In Canada, it's 85,000 to 105,000 Canadian dollars. The gap is real, and it holds across healthcare, technology, construction, and skilled trades, which are precisely the sectors Australia is most actively recruiting from abroad right now. There is an important caveat here that we will address fully in the next category, so before you close this video and book a flight to Sydney, stay with me. Australia is more expensive than Canada. Let us be direct about that. According to the latest cost of living data, the average monthly expenses for a single person in Australia run approximately 2,241 AUD. In Canada, the equivalent figure is around 2,000 AUD, making Australia roughly 12% more expensive overall. Rent is where you feel it most. A one-bedroom apartment in Sydney's city centre currently averages 2,200 to 2,600 AUD per month. The same apartment in Toronto costs approximately 2,200 to 2,500 Canadian dollars, so in raw dollar terms they are comparable, but in Australian dollars, Toronto is slightly cheaper. Groceries in Australia are moderately more expensive than Canada. Utilities run slightly cheaper in Australia. Canada actually pays around 35% more for basic utilities than Australia does. So here is the number that actually matters and that most comparison videos never show you. In Australia, your after-tax salary covers your living expenses for 1.7 months. In Canada, it covers 1.4 months. Read that again. Despite Australia costing more in absolute terms, the higher salaries mean an Australian worker has more purchasing power left over after covering their basics than a Canadian worker does. That is the real cost of living comparison, not what things cost, but how much of what you earn is left after you pay for them. Right now, with Canadian wages under pressure from tariff-driven hiring freezes and wage stagnation, that gap is widening, not shrinking. This is the category that is going to matter most to a significant portion of people watching this right now. Let's start with Canada. Canada has reduced its permanent resident intake targets significantly over the past 2 years. International student permits were cut nearly in half, from approximately 305,000 in 2025 to 155,000 in 2026. The express entry system, which was once the fastest pathway to Canadian permanent residency, has become increasingly unpredictable. And new legislation passed in 2025 gave Canadian immigration officials the power to pause or cancel applications already in processing, meaning people who had already started their journey have their plans frozen mid-route. Now, the tariff war is adding another layer of uncertainty, with the Bank of Canada explicitly acknowledging that lower immigration means less labor force growth. Canada is simultaneously cutting immigration intake and watching its labor market absorb a trade shock. For skilled workers, this means more competition for fewer spots and a weaker job market. Now, look at what Australia just did. In February 2026, this month, the Australian government implemented the most significant overhaul of its immigration system in over a decade. The program is being called Migration 2.0. The permanent migration intake is fixed at 185,000 places for 2025 to 2026, with 71% of those, approximately 132,200 spots, allocated to the skilled stream. That's the highest proportion of skilled migration places Australia has ever offered. The old temporary skills shortage visa has been replaced with a new skills in demand visa that fast-tracks applications in high-need occupations. Employer-sponsored pathways now offer permanent residency after as little as 2 years on a temporary visa, down from 3. Workers who lose a job now have 180 days to find a new sponsor, up from 60, which means far more job security during the transition process. And for skilled trades, every single construction trade worker occupation in Australia is currently classified as in shortage, 100% of those roles. Nurses, software engineers, electricians, civil engineers, all of them sit in the category where Australia is both eligible and urgently hiring. Put simply, Canada is managing a slowdown. Australia is actively competing for the world's talent right now. Both countries offer universal public health care, and this is one area where they're more similar than different, but the details matter. In Canada, provincial healthcare covers GP visits, hospital care, and most specialist referrals with no direct cost at the point of use. Wait times in some provinces, particularly Ontario and British Columbia, are a well-documented issue. Average wait times for specialist appointments can stretch to months in major cities. In Australia, Medicare covers GP visits and hospital treatment with no upfront cost for the patient. Australia also has a parallel private health insurance system that is widely used by working professionals to access faster specialist care, private hospital rooms, and dental coverage. The Medicare levy of 2% is already built into the tax figures we showed you earlier. For immigrants specifically, both countries extend healthcare access to permanent residents. The key difference is the gap period. In Canada, some provinces impose a waiting period of up to 3 months before new residents are covered by provincial health insurance. Australia's Medicare coverage begins immediately upon arriving on a permanent visa or an eligible temporary visa for citizens of countries with reciprocal agreements, which includes the UK, Ireland, New Zealand, Italy, Sweden, the Netherlands, Belgium, Finland, Norway, and Slovenia. For most skilled workers coming from outside those countries, both Canada and Australia require private health insurance during the waiting period, essentially even, with a slight edge to Australia for those coming from reciprocal agreement countries. This is the category that spreadsheets can't fully capture, but it's also the one that makes people stay. Canada offers extraordinary natural beauty, a deeply multicultural urban culture, proximity to the United States for travel and opportunity, and winter. Significant winter. If you're moving from a warm country, the Canadian climate is a genuine lifestyle adjustment that no salary comparison can compensate for if you hate the cold. Australia offers year-round warmth in most major cities, world-class beaches literally accessible from the city, a strong outdoor culture, and a relaxed quality of life that consistently places Australian cities in the top tier of global livability rankings. Sydney and Melbourne regularly appear in the top 10 most livable cities on Earth. Melbourne has held that ranking more than any other city in history. Australia is also geographically positioned as a gateway to Asia. For professionals with ambitions in Singapore, Japan, South Korea, or Southeast Asia, Sydney is a far better base than Toronto or Vancouver. The one lifestyle disadvantage Australia is honest about is geographical isolation. Flying home to visit family in Europe, Africa, South Asia, or the Americas is a long and expensive journey from Sydney. For many immigrants, this is a real emotional and financial cost that deserves serious weight. Here's the honest scorecard. On economic stability right now, Australia wins. Canada's economy is absorbing a trade shock that its government didn't cause and cannot fully control. Australia is not immune to global headwinds, but is not directly in the path of the tariff war. On salaries, Australia wins significantly, higher median earnings and better purchasing power once living costs are accounted for. On cost of living, Canada wins in absolute terms but loses on purchasing power. Your money goes further in Australia despite it costing more. On immigration access right now in 2026, Australia wins decisively. The new Migration 2.0 framework is the most skilled worker-friendly system Australia has ever run. Canada's system is contracting. On healthcare, essentially even, with a slight edge to Australia for reciprocal agreement countries. On quality of life, this one is yours to decide. Canada for those who love four seasons, proximity to North America, and a more familiar Western winter culture. Australia for those who want warmth, outdoor living, and long-term roots in a Pacific-facing economy. Now, here's the nuance. If you're already in Canada, are settled, have permanent residency or citizenship, and work in a sector that's not directly hit by tariffs, this video is not necessarily telling you to leave. Stability has real value, and starting over in a new country has real costs. But if you're outside both countries right now and are deciding where to build the next 10 years of your life, if you're a nurse, an engineer, a software developer, a tradesperson, or a healthcare professional, the 2026 data points clearly point in one direction. Australia is actively building the workforce it wants. Canada is managing the workforce disruption it didn't ask for. Those are two very different stories to be part of. So which country are you leaning towards? Or are you already in one of them watching this and reconsidering? Drop it in the comments. Tell me your confession, tell me your situation, and tell me which country you think makes sense for you right now. I read every comment, and the most interesting ones shape exactly what we research next. If this video gives you something to think about, then make sure you subscribe. This is Border Shift. We do the research, you make the decision.